The idea that we are the origin of life and that it shall be found on our planet, is just so arrogant. It makes no sense.
Welcome to the continuing series of the award-winning Mars documentary titled Blue Planet Red. There's more to Mars than you might think. Water, life, pyramids, UFOs, cataclysm. Watch the film online at blueplanetred.net. Today I'm speaking with George Howard, who has over 1,000 academic citations relating to his decades-long study of what's known as the Younger Dryas Comet Impact Hypothesis. He worked as a legislative assistant for the North Carolina Senator Locke Faircloth in the 1990s, and later founded an environmental restoration and mitigation banking company known as Restoration Systems. In 2023, he hosted the first Cosmic Summit, a conference that invites scientists and independent researchers to present their latest research regarding ancient human civilizations, archaeological mysteries, global catastrophes, emerging alternative energy technologies, and UFOs.
So, George, the way I see it, there are these two hot topics.
Yeah.
Ancient civilizations and UFOs. I think there's quite a few people these days, more and more each day actually, that are trying to answer just these fundamental questions about our history. What really happened in our past? Are we alone in the universe? Have there really been aliens living with us this whole time? We're not really going to go far down that road, but people are trying to answer these fundamental questions. What really happened in our past? Are we alone in the universe? Is there a connection between the two? People are starving for answers, yet we have these institutions who are so eager to dismiss any of this, trying to address any of these questions, even in light of new and what I would argue to be quite compelling data. You're someone who's in contact with quite a number of folks trying to answer these questions, trying to get to the bottom of all this. You seem to be this nexus point, literally organizing conferences to bring these folks together to try to answer these questions, mostly having to do with our own history. That indicates to me that you're an awfully curious individual.
I am a very curious individual, but I think I just represent millions of other people who are sitting around with their eyes bleeding on YouTubes in their pajamas, investigating these subjects, who are perfectly capable of evaluating the evidence themselves. And if curiosity can then drive you to collect the information, there's a lot to be gained from that, because there's plenty of information out there that suggests extraordinary things have happened and are capable of happening, but the institutions don't have a window that large. They've just shut it down to a small disciplinary porthole or silo, and they've just lost curiosity when discovery, is initiated by curiosity. And just something's been lost. I think 20th century science was largely successful, and I just don't feel that 21st century science has the, fundamental human drives behind it to be curious and open-minded. Nothing's ever been of great importance in science has ever been discovered anywhere but left field. It's almost impossible to predict what you're going to discover, right? Because you don't know it yet. And that's why I find the study of heretical science, as I call it, the science that exists, but it's the crazy ant in the attic of the researchers, and they don't want to talk about it because it exists, but they haven't accepted it, and they haven't accepted the conclusions of it. And I think that's where you want to be, man. Left field is where you want to play. That's where the new stuff is coming from. And institutional, big government-funded science, they run from left field. So how are we ever going to catch any new balls?
Why do you think they run?
Because discovery doesn't drive the process anymore. Money does. right, and acceptable grant proposals are the product of a lot of these researchers. And for instance, with the younger Dryas impact hypothesis, there hasn't been $1 of federal money to go into it, where for $3 million from the National Institute of Science, you could probably rule it in or out. But they won't even fund it because it's moved outside the Overton window, or it originated outside the Overton window of what is acceptable to discuss in impact science, which is recent impacts. That the entire field is built around a fundamental understanding that modern humans were never affected by incoming objects from space. And that's a nice, safe position. And I think that position really kind of emerged for good reason. That during the Cold War, we got one going on now too, but during the old-fashioned Cold War, we had a lot to worry about. And I don't think we wanted to divert the fear space of people to the fact that probably 5 times in the last 13,000 years we've had impacts or encounters that might bring it all down now, right? But when you're facing a threat like the Soviet Union was in the 70s, and these things should have emerged and our understanding should have grown from that, and it should have become a part of our culture that we've been traumatized in the past, it was sidelined because they didn't want the fear space taken up.
Aside from worrying about how potentially paradigm shifting information could affect our society, which I think is what you're speaking to, do you think there's also some resistance in the scientific community, even to the scientists themselves? The way I see it is they may be reluctant to study more of this stuff if they feel like they're going to pay a penalty for their research, because as we know, there have been plenty of times a scientist publishes their research and it's rejected and they're outcast and their career is over.
I think Thomas Kuhn, defined the difficulty of changing a paradigm in the 1960s with his book. And it has to reach a tipping point. And I think the tipping point is actually moved away from us, that it's harder and harder to get to the tipping point where you can change a paradigm. Again, I think it's just big money in science, and certain things are acceptable for grants, and everything's funded in that manner, and it doesn't leave any oxygen for new ideas, particularly ones that change a paradigm. But other things can happen too, like cultural understandings. So for instance, Joe Rogan's publicity, if you will, of the younger Dryas impact. He's had Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson on some 20 times. And then he brings the impact up every third program, right? That's how you get to a tipping point. When you've got a big microphone like that and people talking about it on a regular basis, at some point they're going to say, okay, we need to run this down. It's starting to look embarrassing for science. And I would get tired of the questions if I was an archaeologist or paleontologist or anybody that might study the relevant periods. They're going to start getting asked by their children and their grandchildren and nieces and nephews and friends. What about that thing that Rogan keeps talking about? Do you know anything about that impact? That happened, right? And we already see that. The researchers in the Comet research group, there 70 of them around the world or so. They tell me that in their institutions, behind closed doors, it's generally very acceptable hypothesis. And this is, by its very nature, the younger Dryas impact, and panspermia as well, is multidisciplinary. There is no way one discipline can get their arms around it. And there isn't a place for multidisciplinarians any longer in institutional science. There is in science communication, and there are a lot of them out there. There are thousands and thousands of them on YouTube, and that's fantastic. But multidisciplinary analysis of things like the impact is probably not possible in today's climate.
My dad's name is George, and just a personal note here, I think that's primarily where I got my curiosity from. My dad taught me a lot about science, and solar system, and you know, that's what sort of drives me today is this curiosity. So, thank you, Dad. But I do really appreciate what you're trying to do with the Cosmic Summit. We're going to be getting into that next, because it seems to me that you not only value this information yourself, but feel compelled to do something about it, which is why I guess you started this whole Cosmic Summit. The Cosmic Summit is your conference, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's primarily about ancient civilizations and the mysteries surrounding historical sites and artifacts. Would you say that's a fair characterization?
Yeah, I call it broadly unconventional history.
Unconventional history, okay. And this is a conference where you've invited both credentialed scientists and uncredentialed scientists. And I want to talk about uncredentialed scientists. You have a unique way of phrasing this. Something you might call a
pajama scientist. Yeah, pajama scientist, which is what I am.
Yeah, the way you explained it, or the way I've heard you explain it, is that you have your core group of institutional academics, and they're smart, and they've got their history. They know their history well. They know their field of study well. But then you have tons of people across the globe who are staying up late and doing their homework on things, and they're discovering things that perhaps the institutions aren't, or perhaps the academics aren't.
I guess you could call it the wisdom of crowds, which has always existed. But the internet, the effect of the internet on science and kind of exploration of the unknown, I think it's just been a tremendous boon. Because let's say you're talking Egypt. So how many Egyptologists are there worldwide? I mean, I'd hate to venture a guess, but let's say there are 400 credentialed Egyptologists. Well, some of them are going to be very, very intelligent people. And most of them are going to be capable and competent, or they wouldn't keep their job. But how many people are interested in Egypt worldwide? Hundreds of millions. And some proportion of those are going to read every damn thing that's ever been written about Egypt. Okay? And then you take the number of those that are intelligent and are able to synthesize the information, and you're going to end up with far more informed, interesting, creative thinkers on that subject worldwide out of that population than you are in the 400 credentialed scientists. And that's not an insult to those people. That's the way we handled it in the 20th century. Is, you had to study the subject in the library that was open to you by somebody who says, that you qualify for this learning, and we're going to give you this learning over an intense period, and then you shall be our expert, and people shall go to you to find out the information. I think that dynamic is done with. That paradigm has been retired. Not that there's not a role for expertise, but at any given day on YouTube, you can find people who don't have those credentials that are saying things that are just as important, just as intelligent, and always more creative, because they don't have the negative incentives that come with institutional science.
The sheer numbers of people looking at all these different mysteries that we have with a fresh set of eyes. Quite often, it seems like you can come up with some things that really haven't been taken seriously or even acknowledged.
That's right.
By someone with very little training.
Right. Well, a great example is Randall Carlson. And he had a little geology training, in college, but he's largely autodidactic. That's the term.
Autodidactic.
That means you learned it yourself. And a person that makes them an autodidact, and it's self-taught, right? And you don't see Randall criticized on the fundamentals. They might say he's reaching the wrong conclusion, but he knows his geology well enough to speak competently to it, and he taught it himself. Now, particular research protocols and approaches to say geological chemistry and things like that, you can get into narrow bands of things that you can't expect the average person, or not the average person, but the average autodidact to be competent in. But I think people like Randall are tremendously valuable because they're not zoomed all the way in to the micro aspects of the discipline that are taking a larger view of it, and coming at it differently, and willing to call out the willful ignorance of a lot of geology, right? That clearly these floods aren't adequately explained, and they're staring us right in the face. And is anyone out there trying to explain them? It would be just a handful of people, right? And it's going to take the rest of us to push it over the line, right? I just saw Randall did a great piece that I hadn't seen before yesterday on the Lake Nipigon up in Canada, right, as the possible location of the impact. And there are a number of things above the ice. So, and there wasn't just a single impact, but we can assume there were probably some pretty large ones onto the ice sheet, and the Comet Research Group believes that. Okay, what does something that hits 1.5 miles of ice leave behind on the ground? And Randall's making the case that Lake Nipigon, is that signature. Somebody needs to follow up on that. That's a good idea. They don't have everything explained. Run that down.
Right.
There are ways to prove this using your tools or disprove it. And I sometimes yearn for people to try to come and properly disprove it. Now, we've had some people refute YDI papers that the ones that have refuted it, if you will, have all had major flaws. Mark Young, who's part of the Comet Research Group, just revealed the flaws of a 2020 paper by Sun et al. That was another arrow in the back of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. It was reported as volcanoes now have been identified as the cause of the cold period, et cetera, and so forth, out of this paper. And when somebody takes a deeper look at the paper, first thing you find out is one of the lead authors dropped out of it and wanted their name taken off because the work was so sloppy. And the toughest thing in science is to watch things, is to be debunked and then have to turn around and de-dunk, right? Which is what my buddy Dan Richards is calling it, who's coming to the Cosmic Summit.
Right. And
his specialty on YouTube is to de-dunk the debunk, right? And unfortunately, people's patience with this and attention span to science, it generally only lasts to the debunk. Right, and they say, "Oh, well, that got proven wrong. I saw that article."
They throw their hands up and I don't want to hear it. It's already been debunked years ago.
That's right. And people like Dan are making it fun to de-dunk the debunk.
Right.
Because they all can be de-dunked with the Younger Dryas. It doesn't mean that we hadn't made mistakes that people need to point out. But the devastating papers that we're going to put it to bed can all be shown to have flaws on them. And that's been shown by Martin Sweatman and now Dan, in a popular way.
Back to the Cosmic Summit.
Yeah.
You'll invite everyone from, let's say, a professor of geology at Boston University, Robert Schoch, certainly a well-credentialed expert, part of academia. But you'll also, we spoke of Randall Carlson, who has a good fundamental history, autodidactic, as you say. And then quite a few other people here, just to name a few: Praveen Mohan, Johanna James, Ben Van Kerkwick, Luke Caverns, Adam Young, among many others. Now, George, tell me why you felt so strongly about inviting this group of people to Cosmic Summit.
Kind of my thesis was, and I'll stick to the speculators a little bit, say like Randall, or Johanna James, or Luke Caverns, okay? So Luke's got 1 million followers on TikTok, but he's communicating science ideas and understandings of history and the Maya, and et cetera. His ideas to me at that time when I came up with this, I said that it's kind of like they're downloads of music, that they're songs, that people like his music. And somebody's downloaded that song 1 million times about him talking about that particular temple. But where's the concert? Where do you go get to see the band? You can get a lot out of music just listening to it on your speakers. But for some reason, we want to go see the musician, and even more, we want to go hang out with the other fans of that music. And there's this intense interest in unconventional ancient history, and these stars of it, if you will, but there wasn't a place to see them. So I figured that good role, because I happened to have the Rolodex from working with the Comet Research Group, so I knew the Ph.D.s and I also knew the speculators. And I said that would just be a great context for learning and cross-fertilization and publicity, and also creating a community. And damn if it didn't work. That there's a special vibe at the Cosmic Summit. And what it is, it's people who in their own communities are fascinated by this, tale of the past and their understandings of it. And you can't blame people. They just aren't going to have anybody in their immediate circle who shares these interests.
Right. You don't invite everybody, but you invite, these select people, because it seems like you believe, you call them speculators.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit more to it than that. They're basing their work off of good science too.
Yeah,
they
right.
just don't necessarily have the credentials.
That's right.
Right. But you wouldn't invite them to present their findings if you didn't believe there was something to it.
I guess that's a little personal curation, but I don't want it to get too woo. Speculation could go a long way, and I think it's all okay in context, but I wanted to keep it a little grounded. And I want people that are going to speak at the summit, even if they're not credentialed, to be the kind of people that will dive into a scientific paper. So I want the people that are reading the actual primary materials and the data, and then are synthesizing it with other things they may know. Maybe they're comparing it to Plato's Atlantis, right? That's not primary data. That's not going to be published anywhere. But it may have a role in this, and someone's got to consider that. I mean, how in the world, what is the possibility of the coincidence that a philosopher 2,200 years ago would have said 9,000 years before my ancestors' time, the world went to hell? And then we come in the 21st century, you didn't have to read any Plato. We weren't inspired by it whatsoever, but you go back to archaeological sites of that time period, 13,000 years ago, and the breath of hell is evident. That means there's a certain synthesis between what we consider to be, myth and story and objective truth. And that's when it gets cool. But it's hard to get, you can't work Plato into the scientific paper, right? You don't want to cite him.
Yeah.
For instance, right?
Right.
But he has a role to play.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah.
While this has yet to become mainstream,
Yeah.
I think we are right on the cusp of that.
I do too.
And I think that you saw that coming. And I think that's why you started putting these conferences together, because you know the value of getting people together.
I consider myself kind of the ball boy for the Comet Research Group, right? Is that the ball boy, he gets to ride on the bus. He knows all the stats. He knows where all the bodies are buried. He's really the most knowledgeable guy on the, generalist on the team. But he doesn't have a role. He never makes a basket, But you get to be a part of it, and you ride on the bus. And that was kind of my thing. So then I was like, well, God, I need a little bit something more than that. So that's why I started a blog in 2010 called the Cosmic Tusk. And certainly the credentialed scientists can't do that. They got something to lose. But I don't have anything to lose. And I used to play in politics, and I've got sharp elbows. And when people started coming after us, and Dan's kind of doing this work now, I would de-dunk them and say, here's where you're wrong,
Right.
and you're either misunderstanding or haven't actually looked our information over, which is very, very common. That you'll get, criticisms from people who didn't even read the paper, which is just beyond contempt.
But I think you understood the value of communication and
Yeah.
pushing back on the institutional narrative, not that it's always necessarily nefarious or that it's always necessarily wrong, but you understood the value of communication, and you started the blog, 10, 15 years ago, okay, and since then, you've been able to more or less start unifying all the people working on this and trying to provide a home, for this field of study. And maybe you're not the only one, but I think you're one of the more influential people who have started doing this, because you have a good 30,000 foot view of everything that's going on and keep up with all the latest stuff. So I think credit goes to you towards having a significant impact, getting all of this subject matter into the mainstream. Because I think, like you were just saying, if we got Joe Rogan talking about it every third episode, it's only a matter of time where, you'll hear your relative bring it up without, prompting them, let's say. I mean, maybe we're already there, but I think if not,
I look forward to the future, and I also value the accomplishments we've made getting this into the public mind. When we were first working on it in 2005, I was actually into it in the 90s, but when the first started working with the Ph.D.s, Dr. Firestone in 2001, and then some other people in 2005, and then we published the paper, you could get us all in a minibus, man. The people who had ever considered the thought of an Ice Age comet, right? And to see it go from a dozen people to, at first you couldn't really see how many because there weren't there was no social media and all that stuff, but then just started to see it blossom. And it's a very fractal thing. So we're nowhere near the end of it.
Yeah.
And Rogan's just one example of how it's leveled up and leveled up. And just recently, I've gotten, frankly, a lot of very shallow joy at our social media numbers.
So you've grown it since the late 90s, when it was just a car full of people who knew this stuff, until now we've got Cosmic Summit videos on the internet, on YouTube, and I understand it's doing quite well.
Yeah, that's a neat thing now, is that we started putting out, right when we started the summit, we actually started it digitally at the same time. It's very deliberate, right? That we wanted it to be, the summit and the social media to be very tightly integrated. So in January 2023, we started putting out 2 videos a day that feature speakers at the Cosmic Summit, either at the summit or in some other context, but it's recorded and out there. And we clip this stuff up and try to summarize an idea and put it out. So we do 2 or 3 videos a day, and have done it every single day for the next 22 months. And just in the last 4 or 5 months, it's really taken off, man. So that is a joy. I mean, that's so much more effective than my old blog sitting out there and maybe, 2,000, 5,000 people a month look at it.
It must feel good.
That was satisfying in its own little way. But then you level up and you get, 7, and it's still going up, but 7.5 million views this month on YouTube of just Cosmic Summit material. It's very gratifying. It's like, hell yeah, people are hungry for this stuff, and I'm lucky to be in a position to kind of serve it up to them, because I've got all these terrific friends who participate in the summit.
So George, let's talk ancient human history. You keep bringing up this thing called Younger Dryas, and for those who don't know, for those who have no idea, never heard of this sort of thing, can you explain the name first and then what it's referring to?
The name came from a little flower, an Arctic flower called Dryas octopella. And how does it work? It only grows when it's cold, right? But whatever, it's a signature of a certain kind of climate. Yeah, I think it's only when it's cold. And they named it after that because the species flourished during this particular period called the Younger Dryas. The Younger Dryas was a well-established mainstream understanding that the climate crashed terribly 12,800 years ago. And temperatures in the northern hemisphere dropped by 20 degrees. Just imagine that. And when they first started seeing this dramatic change in climate in the 20th century, they thought it took like 1,000 years for that transition to happen, that 20 degrees to be lost. And it got down to 500, then it was 250, then it was a decade. And now it looks to all eyes like it was virtually instantaneous, right? Which begs the question, what the hell caused it?
We're not going to get political here, but when people think climate change, we're thinking gradually over a long period of time. Okay, we may or may not feel its effects from a year-to-year basis, but you're discussing something here that is much more instantaneous.
It'd be horrifying. Everything would change instantly. It will, not just within your lifetime, but within a long weekend.
So we know through geological records, for example, that something within human history essentially upended the way of life here on Earth.
That's right. And the important part is it's in human history. But the understanding that the comet did the dinosaurs in is both important to us and also a little bit of a distraction, because people don't quite realize the importance of what we're talking about. This was a mass extinction event that was extraordinarily recent in terms of major global change. Mm-hmm. There wouldn't have been another extinction of that magnitude for millions and millions of years before that. Some have criticized, particularly Mark Boslow, have said, well, it's just not right that we would find something so very recent to us, that the coincidence between technological understanding scientific humans and this thing are too close. But what he ignores is, what if the technological, modern thinking, reading, civilized human is a result of the impact? As Alan West once told me, he said, our history is long periods of quiescence, occasionally interrupted by intense trauma. Mm-hmm. Right? That it's quiet for a long, long time, which kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. You know, that you get two sides of the coin there. That they're two things that rule us: long stretches of time and intense periods of trauma.
So if we talk about the trauma, these events, these catastrophic global events, there are these two competing ideas for exactly what may have caused this destruction here on Earth, one of which you've been working on for quite some time now, the comet impact hypothesis, and something that Professor Robert Schoch has been promoting in his work, essentially boiling down to what is known as a solar outburst.
Yeah.
Which I think is a little bit more difficult for people to understand. People understand kinetic energy of rock hitting Earth, but something having to do with the solar outburst. So just tell us the basics of each one of these hypotheses and why there's merit to them.
Well, I tell you what, I'm a hell of a lot more scared of the sun than I am comets, right? On a day-to-day basis. I think within our lifetimes, the chances of something coming off of that big ball of plasma that flips the lights off is a hell of a lot greater than having a crater forming event that changes the climate. And I've made friends with Robert. He came to the Cosmic Summit this year, and there are probably some people who said, well, I thought you were a comet guy. Mm-hmm. Man, it's way too early in this to be picking sides like that. The idea is there was a catastrophe. We all need to stay on the team that wants to get to the bottom of that and is open-minded to whatever the nature was. That said, we've got 50 plus peer-reviewed published papers showing evidence for an impact, we believe. We do not have a crater. When you have a class of objects that we suspect we encountered from the Tard meteor stream at 12.8, from 50 meters up to 150 meters, they aren't going to leave a crater. What they do is cause a heinous explosion that is differentiated by from a nuclear explosion only by the lack of radiation. The heat, the kinetic pulse, the destruction would be entirely like a nuclear explosion, and you'd see 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 of them over a period of 6 hours. And that's a bad day for planet Earth.
So the way I understand Professor Schoch's work is that, say you take the aurora borealis, it's an interaction between the plasma from the sun and our magnetic sphere around the Earth, right?
Right.
The magnetosphere. Mm-hmm. That on steroids essentially can produce these shapes in the sky, which I think is what a lot of the petroglyphs seem to indicate across the globe, is that they were looking at some plasma event that happened in the sky. But not only that, see, that seems kind of harmless. You see these nice colors in the sky, but it actually goes one step further in that it is somewhat more akin to an electrical discharge, like you shock your finger on the door handle or lightning coming down from the sky, which can have catastrophic physical effects on the Earth itself. And one of the things I brought up to him when I was speaking with him is, while he hasn't yet studied it closely, he didn't immediately discount the notion that our Grand Canyon could have been
shock,
produced.
a scar of a lightning bolt, if you will.
If you look at the Grand Canyon from space, it has this dendritic pattern to it, and it has yet to be explained how it could have been fully formed by river flow.
Yeah.
And it's awfully compelling.
Man, listen, I'm a catastrophist. I'm a little bit all of the above.
You know, we have this Grand Canyon, it's got this, what they call a Lichtenberg pattern, which is an electrical scar.
Yeah.
And which, you know, they have, I've seen pictures of people who have been struck by lightning.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks the same way. It looks like lightning. That's the scar that it leaves. And not only does it leave that scar, you'll see this on golf courses too, when right on the green it's got this lightning pattern out there. But it can also excavate and send a ton of material all over the place, and it can be quite catastrophic. My question is, like to your point, why should we be arguing one versus the other? Isn't it possible that there could have been both?
I'm a big fan of the electric universe theory, right? And a lot of people see that as pitted against us and whatnot. Of course, both of those phenomena could be true, right? And it is mighty, mighty weird how, you know, on Mars as well as Earth, you see big dramatic features that look exactly like when you electrify a plate with a bolt of electricity. It actually excavated out and it looks just like that. And there's some other things too. But I don't think they both happened at the Younger Dryas. I think we're going to have to kind of choose sides, if you will, or determine which one, you know, is valid. Now, some people say, well, why couldn't the comets have crashed in the sun and set the sun off and whatnot? And I think that's difficult astronomically, right? There's not a, for instance, if it's the Taurid meteor stream, there's not a time where the Taurid meteor stream suddenly, you know, dumps into the sun, right? But perhaps there's a phenomena. I mean, those are some pretty complex cosmological questions there. But my intuition says that it wasn't a mix of those two things on the same day. But could there have been traumas of both types over time? Hell yeah. In fact, we damn well know there are. There have been, no doubt, there have been traumatic impacts, and no doubt there have been very, very, very violent solar storms that would take us out now.
You know, I really want to focus on Younger Dryas, just continuing along here, because we're talking about, how long ago was it that this time period that known as Younger Dryas?
12.8 to 11.6.
12.8 to 11.6. That something catastrophic happened to sort of get us into that ice age. We refer to this as an ice age.
Kind of a bounce back of the ice age.
Oh, okay.
When it happened, they even say it might have been slightly warmer than it is today, but you still had the ice sheets. Wouldn't that have been weird?
Okay, so something happened and flipped up the whole world upside down, and then we had 1,200 years of cold?
Yeah.
And then something else happened, and that's how we got out of it. Is that the basic?
Yeah, that's right. And the something else, the end of the Younger Dryas, is more mysterious than the beginning. At least we got some working hypotheses on it.
So you've spoken of this thing called the black mat.
Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know, just what is the black mat?
Yeah. The black mat is the signature of the impact, and it is analogous to the KT boundary, the Cretaceous Tertiary boundary at the dinosaur extinction.
Okay.
What the hack of the Comet research group, and particularly Alan West, was let's go back to soil profiles at archaeological sites that extend beyond 13,000 years ago and reach back into the time of the Ice Age mammals and the Clovis people. And then let's test this soil just as the Alvarezes did. So the exact same science, many of the same proxies found by the Alvarez team to be enriched and magnified at that line, so you knew that something dramatic happened and that chemistry had to come from space. We used the same thing at the Younger Dryas. In fact, they used spherules as well, that there were, you know, countless trillions of spherules of droplets that rained back down after the impact into the Yucatan, right? So it would have melted a vast quantity of Earth material mixed with the impactor itself. That stuff's molten, and then it rains down, and those little spherules remain. They're essentially frozen. Well, you found the same thing at the Younger Dryas, only 13,000 years ago, right? And you found nanodiamonds, and now we've identified shocked quartz. So the same proxies for the dinosaur comet event has now been brought up into the human history past, and that's unthinkable.
And these things,
for a lot of science.
What you're describing, shocked quartz, and nanoparticles, nanodiamonds, these things indicate there was a lot of heat.
Yeah, unearthly conditions, like 3,000 C, like 5,000 degrees. Yeah.
Something catastrophic happened. We know because how far down in the soil it is, we can date it to
12.8. But then what you find there, to your original question, is a black layer, okay? And it's often misunderstood, justifiably so. People think, well, that's the charcoal of the event. That's the burn. It's actually not, in our understanding of it. That we find the proxies below the black layer. Immediately below is where we find the enriched geochemistry and the spherules and the nanodiamonds and all that. The black layer itself was the after effects. And the after effects would have been a wet, cold, algal wasteland, right? Where everything just went to shit at a lot of locations. Probably not every place, because you don't find the black mat everywhere you have 13,000-year-old soils. But you do in about 80% of all paleo sites in the US. So well over 100. And if you type black mat, Younger Dryas, or archaeology, or paleo, black mat, whatever, you can go and see hundreds and hundreds of pictures all over the US that exhibit this same line. And some of them are at archaeological sites that are very well dated. I mean, you could see it on roadside cuts out west, right? But the important thing was to go to well-studied archaeological sites that already had plenty of literature behind them, no question about the dating, like Blackwater Draw in Murray Springs, that are famous Clovis sites. And if we go find that geochemistry or the other proxies at that layer at 13,000 at these sites, at least we don't have to argue about the dates, right? Mm-hmm. Because that work's already been done. Yeah. What a great hack. So so you find the black mat layer, and here's what's kind of interesting about it, the point. You do not find the bones of Ice Age megafauna above it. There has never been a mammoth bone found beyond the black mat. All right, there has never been a giant ground sloth found above the black mat. And even more importantly to us, the first widely recognized, easily identifiable inhabitants of North America, the Clovis people. Now we know there's a lot of work on pre-Clovis, and they weren't the start of the story in America, but they were the one that we first populated culture from Miami to Seattle to South America. You find these Clovis points, which are the very first arrowheads you see in the US, right? And that culture probably only extended, I think they got it down in one paper down to 200 years, but let's say 200, 300, 400 years. They came over, populated the entire US, and you don't find a Clovis point above the black mat. And it changes. You end up having Folsom and redstones. The technology, as they call it, changes. Something dramatically shocked people out of making Clovis points. So that suggests something very dramatic happened.
So let's talk about what people refer to as the flood myth.
Yeah.
A lot of people might have heard of Noah's Ark, but as I understand it, that this story is not unique to, let's just say, Western civilization here. This is a common story that's shared throughout many cultures across the world, historically having nothing to do with one another. And this flood myth, maybe it wasn't such a myth after all.
I've seen estimated 300 cultures around the world have a oral or written tradition of a catastrophe as their starting point. and that there was a golden age before, everybody got wiped out, very few made it, and we're lucky to be here now. And that's shared universally. So either that's an archetypal thing that's built into the human brain through evolution to remember great catastrophes in the past, or we need to take these people seriously. And I find that to be one of the great hypocrisies of modern academia, that indigenous cultures, the respect for indigenous cultures, appropriately so in many cases, has never supposedly been higher. That we begin meetings by apologizing for taking their land. And we respect their right to ancient artifacts and bones. All of these things. It's respect, respect, respect. But when they tell us their stories, they tell them that's just a bunch of bullshit. It's a campfire story. That's just a bunch of brown people sitting around a fire making shit up. Mm-hmm. And that is the most fundamental disrespect that you could provide those cultures. That they told you how they began, and you say no. And I think that extends to because of the resentment of Christianity, right? That when we threw out a biblical worldview, which was way overdue, we threw out the damn baby with the bathwater. It's not like everything in the damn book's bullshit. I mean, come on, man. I mean, have a little more nuanced view about how we might have transmitted our true past all around the world in 1,000 different ways, and it speaks of the same thing. Either it's floods or fires or waves, all of which would have been involved in this. And that those were
the Younger Dryas event.
Yeah.
While academia perhaps wants to interpret them as just made-up campfire stories,
yeah,
that instead maybe we should be interpreting them as eyewitness accounts.
Absolutely.
Is that the general idea?
Absolutely, particularly if it seems to fit data. That there were catastrophes capable of causing giant waves,
right,
fire from the heaven,
why,
and floods.
Why would there be, what other logical explanation would there be if you have these stories that are all very similar to one another, mm-hmm, the same beats, the same plot points, mm-hmm, and the same this, that, and the other? I mean, aren't we curious enough as a species to start to see a pattern emerge here?
Yeah.
Why are we not relying on pattern recognition here to identify something that could be so consequential to our understanding of our own history? Mm-hmm. It just seems like there's a reluctance to do that, and it seems like, rightly so, that the folks under the Cosmic Summit umbrella here are really trying to answer this question.
That's right. That's right. We're trying to be an antidote to willful ignorance, willful knowledge.
One of the things that I learned about recently that's incredibly fascinating is the site known as Derinkuyu.
Yeah.
Okay, and as I understand it, it is just essentially a human-sized ant colony.
Yeah.
Underground.
Yeah.
And I kept on coming back to this question: why would people go through the trouble?
Yeah.
Of building this vast subterranean shelter?
Yeah.
Because my own personal philosophy or personal view is that people are inherently lazy.
Yeah.
And are only going to do the bare minimum.
All right.
Unless it's something they're really passionate about. But who could be really passionate about digging?
And all of them would have to be equally passionate.
And so what would cause somebody to go through that much trouble for shelter?
Yeah, and they say it's raiding parties and tribal warfare and whatnot. But I think you kind of see a little bit more of that. Oh, you could say the same thing with the catastrophe. You think you'd see more underground cities if people's natural reaction to being raided on and attacked by invading armies was to dig below. Right. But if it was a reaction to increased activity, because we don't believe there was just one day of this. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to speak for everybody, but we think there was a period of increased activity that could have lasted several hundred years, right? That would have been a good year, not that much happened, another year, fucking awful, and then one really bad day, mm-hmm, okay, but bookended by a bunch of other, mm-hmm, stuff.
Meaning to say, okay, whether it be cosmic comet impact or solar outburst, something changed the climate dramatically, cosmologically speaking, at the snap of a finger, and suddenly we have to adapt quickly. end dramatically, and taking shelter underground could have been, at least for some people, their only option.
Yeah.
Just to survive, simply
That's
survival.
Right. Yeah.
If we move on, let's move on to Egypt, a topic of endless fascination for many people across the world. Just looking at the pyramids, simply looking at the pyramids. The textbooks have told us throughout time these were just nothing but tombs that were built for the pharaohs, and I think that there's been a lot of discussion on perhaps that wasn't really the intent of these things. And through these pyramids, there's a lot of people taking a look at these, both from academia and the pajama scientists themselves, on reshaping this narrative on these ancient sites, and the pyramids seem to be, you know, at the top of the list here to try to figure out what the heck was going on, because here we have these huge stone blocks. How would we move them today would be problematic, and that the precision with which they were placed together, and that they were carried from how far, miles away, just for tombs?
Well, we know where the tombs are in Egypt. It's called the Valley of the Kings. Thousands of years of dynastic pharaohs, and we know what their tombs look like. And they were absolutely chock-a-block littered with the most beautiful art and hieroglyphs you could imagine. That's the nature of the tombs. They're tunnels of art.
But I keep going back to this.
And then the pyramids.
People are lazy. Why go through all the trouble just for a tomb? That's not logical to me. So there are some people today who are suggesting these pyramids, well, are something else.
Yeah, that they had a functional purpose. But I think the first stopping place that I like to let people know is there is no art in the pyramids, and there are no pyramids in the art. In other words, the Egyptians absolutely covered every single temple, and every tomb is littered with communications and art and hieroglyphs. It's just what they did. I mean, it's astonishing. You're like walking in, it's like a book on the walls. But then their most important structures, and those they're most noted for, zip. You know, there's one little cartouche of Khafre, and that's how we're going to date it, you know? And so, no pyramids in the art, no art in the pyramids. I think just says that there's something different going on with those structures. And I've come around to, they must have had some functional purpose.
So there's a few different ideas being tossed around there, and I think they're quite compelling. What are some of the more interesting ones you've heard?
Oh, my buddy Bob Grenier, who's kind of my guru now, and it's a guru light. I wouldn't do anything he told me to do or anything, all right? But I just like where he's coming from, and I think he's on the cutting edge. He says that they were plasma, they were generating plasma effects for the purposes of transmutation, right? And and Christopher Dunn is kind of said much the same thing, but Bob takes another step. I think plasma is a very, very important and underappreciated phenomenon, and I think it's extraordinarily powerful, and I think it's actually sentient, just like Robert Temple does. I think that's where the other world is in plasma, and there are configurations and geometries in the pyramid that suggest knowledge of the tree of life. Bob says the tree of life is the representation of the yin and the yang, and the destruction and creation that comes from plasmoids, which is a phenomenon that was well studied in the 50s, and then it all went quiet. But
so it seems like people are thinking that these had something to do with perhaps energy production.
Yeah, that's right.
Some fundamental level.
That's right. And maybe even the ability to transmute elements.
Transmute meaning?
Meaning the, creation of valuable metals from non-valuable metals.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's all quite fascinating. If we move on to even just the other archaeological mysteries.
Yeah.
You brought up these vases and their study by Ben Van Kerkwijk and among others. There's a few different people working on these specifically. Can you describe just what these, for people who haven't heard of what these vases are, describe What are these vases? Why do we call them vases? Are they vases?
Oh, the vase stories,
What's the big deal?
It's the most productive and fascinating thing going on in unconventional history studies.
Vases in ancient part of the world, big deal.
Well, it's kind of like the Younger Dryas. It's got a good start that the mainstream supports a central pillar of it, right? The Younger Dryas, it'd be a much more difficult theory if the mainstream didn't already believe that there was a 1,200-year cold period that's unexplained. Okay. That said, in a similar fashion, mainstream Egyptologists, when describing the vases, will tell you they are pre-dynastic, which means they came before the pharaohs, that they are found in grave goods of people back 6, 7, 8,000 years ago that were before the pharaohs. So there were no pyramids, no tombs, no hieroglyphics, no art.
Prior to pharaohs,
Yeah, that's right.
there were people who were buried with these vases.
Yeah, and in fact, those people were buried with those vases and then crude vases.
Okay, so what makes these vases so special?
They're perfect.
They're perfect.
Yeah, they're perfectly symmetrical. If it's round on top, that's going to be the roundest thing you could imagine.
Okay, well, I
If
took
it's
pottery
flat-
class. I took pottery class. I
Yeah.
got my vase looking pretty nice.
Yeah,
Miss
man.
Titleman gave me an A on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you take it and put it under a point cloud scanner, a modern one that can put 100,000 different points, and measure that location in 3D space down to the thousandth of a millimeter.
Okay, they were really good. They're really good with pottery.
Well, you would have to suggest that there would be someone on the Earth that could produce that now.
Nobody on Earth can do that.
You could probably stand up a team, and give it a couple of years, a few $1 million, have to invent some new tools. You could probably get it done. But we didn't even have the tools to measure their perfection until just the last 20, 30 years, right? We didn't have the tools, to make something perfect. If you're trying to make something round, as round as you can, right? Or as flat as you can. You need a tool that'll show you how you're doing. Well, these things are so perfect that we've only had tools for 30 years that can measure to that level of accuracy needed. So how in the hell, as my buddies, the Snake Brothers, call them the butt flat people? How do the butt flat people, which is, just the cavemen, no culture, no nothing, just humans that knew, ignorant beasts. Okay, how in the hell did they create something like that? But the interesting thing is they're found in these pre-dynastic graves. It appears, and this is supposition, but there are crude ones in there too, and you don't find the nice ones in every grave. It looks to some of us like those people found them from somebody else, and then they were making the crude ones, emulating it. And indeed, the Egyptians, the dynastic Egyptians, did the same thing. Right? That they would make vases that look much like these vases, but they'd be carved in alabaster, and they wouldn't be perfect.
So at a glance, you see a bunch of vases, but under closer inspection, not all vases are created equal.
That's exactly right.
Some are so...
And by closer inspection, I mean down to, tiny fractions of millimeters.
We inspect some of these vases using high precision modern technology.
That's right.
Examination, okay?
Yeah.
And we're detecting that they are perfectly round, perfectly symmetrical.
Perfectly flat, yep.
Perfectly flat. What could have produced something like this? Because you're saying that, by all accounts, the human element here, it's hard to explain that.
We just had to have something in the toolkit that we don't allow now. There had to be a way to produce those things, and it had to come from a fairly technologically adept society. They had to have a lathe at least, and they're not supposed to have had the lathe till I think 2,000 or 3,000 years later.
So we call them vases.
Yeah, you can call them anything, jars. Yeah.
We think, just stick a bouquet of flowers in it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the big deal?
Yeah, well, why would you make something so perfect to hold sheep blood or essential oils or whatever in the hell? A lot of things, there's good school of thought and manufacturing philosophy or whatnot that you only design up to the point where you can utilize the perfection.
Yeah.
You don't need to.
Why go through the trouble?
Yeah. If nobody's eye can see 1,000th of a millimeter difference,
Right.
why would you do it aesthetically? And if it wasn't supposed to be a part of a jet engine that needed those high tolerances and precision, if you couldn't detect it aesthetically and you had no utilization of it that required that, why the hell would someone make it so perfect?
Yeah.
And how could it be made so perfect in a time that is given so few resources and capabilities? And that's why it's the best thing that's going on in this whole field of study now. And they're two just wonderful patrons of the projects. It started with Christopher Dunn's son and his friend Alex and Nick, and they did some of the first scanning. And Adam Young, fella in Manhattan who spoke at the Cosmic Summit this year. It's actually the most watched video with someone who's never done a YouTube before, never written a scientific paper. But what he is, he's a well-set individual who purchased vases and then paid for their analysis. And then very quickly after Adam began that project, Matt Bell in Florida did as well. And he has bought dozens of these, in fact, cleared the market globally of them. The two purchasers are kind of Adam and Matt. And I think that they've tripled the prices of them. These were already pretty expensive objects, right? But Matt particularly, they've just cleared the market off of them. And now they're having all of them scanned and putting that information out to the public. And in fact, they're 3D printing them. And those are neat little objects to have around. You know, they aren't going to be as perfect as the ones, and they're actually made of plastic, and they're not the right color and all of that. But we gave them out as gifts at the Cosmic Summit in a gift bag this year. Matt donated them to us, several hundred of them.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know, it just needs to become a part of our culture that we've got something from the past that there's just no explanation for, man.
We call them faces, but are they?
Well, they're containers of some sort.
Sure.
They don't have a hole in the bottom.
They have
got one
these
at the top.
interesting
The
we call
handles?
but
And then the handles are imperfect. They're visibly sometimes tilted.
okay.
I didn't know that for a while.
But we don't know their function yet.
No.
Really? We
No,
call
it
them vases,
almost
that's what it
looks
looks
like
like,
somebody
but-
was trying to show off. Right? Like, hold my beer, watch this. I'm going to take a piece of granite, which we haven't pointed out yet. These are carved in granite. You were talking about pottery. Well, this isn't spun on a wheel, right? This is somebody took a block of granite and then with no tool more sophisticated than a copper
countertop
chisel.
in the kitchen.
That's
like
right.
that kind of granite.
That's right.
Okay.
I don't know if that stuff's diorite and some of these harder things, but yeah, these are, hard forms of granite. And all you got's soft metal tools, copper chisel, is what we use it on, or other rocks. And somehow you make a vase that is so thin that you can put a pin light inside of it and see it shining through the granite material. That's really, really hard, man. Granite's brittle as well as hard. I mean, one little slip of whatever was digging out the interior of those things would easily shatter that thing. And not only that, but you'll find some of, what are they called? I guess it's like breccia, but there'll be two components. There'll be two different kinds of rock in it, where it's really, really hard rock, and then there'll be crystals of other stuff, inclusions of softer material. And it's like they're showing off. They go find great examples of that and say, take a look at this. We're able to carve this thing and not dig into the soft parts as you move off the hard parts, right? You would think that it's just very, very hard to take two different, kinds of material and still carve it with such precision. It's just, it's inexplicable, as I said in the title to Adam's video.
Who started bringing attention to these?
Ben Van Kerkwijk of Uncharted X, who's a Cosmic Summit regular. And a lot of times he's kind of like Randall. He gets attributed with the original research, which is fine because you're the publicizer of it, right? So people think, well, Ben scanned the vases, or, Randall found the black mat. But they're communicators. That's what they're doing, and they're also damn intuitive people who know the good subjects and know where we can find the stuff. So Ben started communicating.
We knew the vases existed.
That's right.
But
there are museums all over the world, but no one had ever bothered to scan them.
No one made a big deal about it.
That's right.
No one ever bothered to scan them.
Yeah, no one had ever put it on there. Well, these things haven't been around that long.
So leave it to a pajama scientist to highlight their perfection.
That's right.
Another oddity that I came across as it relates to these archaeological mysteries and perhaps this idea of ancient technology, which is kind of a scary thing to think about, because you think, okay, all they had were maybe simple tools. But then we come across things like what appear to be saw blade cuts in rocks, and maybe even tube drillings in rocks. What's going on there?
Man, I don't know, but I tell you, I went over to Egypt with Ben and Johanna James, Jimmy Corsetti was on that trip in 2020, and saw that stuff for myself. And it's everywhere, man. It's not like it's one or two. God, you find the tube drills, you know, you can find a dozen of them at any particular site, right? You see that stuff. And it just doesn't add up. You're like, why did somebody go to the trouble to do that? And how in the hell did they cut it with the tools that are given them? You know, the saw marks, you know, I think there's where they call them overshots, where clearly somebody was trying to saw it and then went too far and did too much sawing. If you didn't have a very efficient tool that allowed you to continue doing it farther than you intended to, like you're taking the thing saw blade and it's so easy to do it that you can overshoot something. No big deal, right? Because it's so easy. Well, if you were doing it,
you'd stop exactly where you wanted to.
Exactly, with sand and wire or whatever in the hell they gave
You're
them.
You're not going any further.
You're not going to go any further than you need to, you know. And this stuff's lying around the Cairo Museum. And then there are objects like the schist disc. And that thing, it looks entirely modern. Its whole feel is modern. And somehow it is carved with beautiful angles and curves. I mean, look like something that was made with, you know, a computer and then manifested with a 3D printer. Right. And not like someone took another rock and beat on something until you were able to come out with a cog that's got, I mean, it looks like a sophisticated propeller or something.
Do we know its purpose?
And and that stuff goes back pre-dynastic. No, there's absolutely no, there's not even good speculation on what the hell the thing was used for. Yeah.
It's unsettling.
Yeah, and it dates back to the I think it dates back to those very earliest times or earlier too. And what you find is that the most amazing things are the earliest, and then it degrades over time, which doesn't make sense either. For some group of humans, I mean, we had 300,000-400,000 years as sapien. I mean, do we really think only the last 5,000 we got some game? I mean, no, there might have been, and I think there could have been a light touch civilization out there. I don't think that, and they didn't have to necessarily look like us, right? And they could have preceded everybody by tens of thousands of years and then maybe blinked out or whatever, right? I call it a precursor civilization, right? And just, you know, something before. And I didn't really hold that view 15, 20 years ago. I've been persuaded by, well, I guess I've read Fingerprints of the Gods right after it came out and stuff. But I was more like, this is interesting stuff, but I don't, you know, I hadn't bought in. But based on, you know, some travel and some things I've seen and people I've talked to and things I've read, there's more to the story. And it's not a linear progression by any means. And there appears to have been someone before that was sophisticated enough to leave behind.
I could be wrong, but I just think that makes so many people feel uncomfortable that they'd rather not even think about it. Because it's almost a tragedy. Like if there were people who were advanced in this way, in a way that we can't possibly understand, and they were right here before us, and they're not here anymore. what happened.
Unless they're zipping around in saucers.
Unless they're zipping around in saucers. Is there a connection here between what's going on the other side of the spectrum, way up there in the sky? We'll get to more of that in a little bit. And I saw, getting back to the Cosmic Summit, Johanna James gave a presentation on something called the Bar Caves in India. And these particular caves have an uncanny degree of perfection to them as well.
Yeah.
And we think cave, I think, okay, I see a cave, what's the big deal? There's a cave bear coming out of it. Maybe there's some cave paintings in there, but these aren't like that.
They're weird, man. And they're kind of like the vases in a room.
They appear to be polished.
Yeah, they're
smooth.
perfectly polished and perfectly smooth and perfectly symmetrical, unless they're not. There are parts of it, that the hallway will diverge from what would seem to be a straight line to the next room, and it'll go like this. I mean, why would they carve it this way or that? And I recommend people, because that's a pretty obscure subject, Bar Caves. But it's a perfect kind of Cosmic Summit subject, because we don't want to just rehash the stuff everybody's already heard of. You want to come bring new material in and interesting new things. It might have been around for a long time, but just hadn't come to people's attention. And Bar was a great example of that. And that's why Johanna's video is the second most popular one from the summit this year. Because people hadn't heard, they're like, wow, there's just these set of caves. And then when you say caves, these are not natural caves. They're dug into a big long rock on a hillside. And then I think there are 4 or 5 of these entirely enigmatic, large series of rooms that have great resonance properties. So you would have had to have an understanding of sound to do it. And then they have the same kind of perfection that the vases do. And again, it's like somebody that had such a powerful tool that they were just like, watch this. I'm just going to do this for fun. There's no reason you have to do it like this. There's no reason to polish these things perfectly. I think they came from a time before. I think they're a great example of that. And then the Serapeum, which is an underground complex at the Step Pyramid of Djoser. You go down there, and there are, 27 or something like that, gigantic black stone boxes that have been carved from granite that came from Libya. So you got the most forbidding desert on earth between you and the place you quarried this stuff from. How in the hell did you move the block over there? And then they have degrees of perfection, like the corners within the box at the very bottom. Very, very hard to dig something like that out and leave it just perfect.
Yeah.
But they managed to. So you got a mystery, and then they've all, one of them's just still sitting out in the hallway, which there's a number of things like that. Russ Allen gave a presentation last year called Unfinished, how, there are these things that are just sitting there like, hold on, how did they do something so perfect, get all these boxes in, and then just blew the whistle and called it off and left one sitting in the hall?
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But back to the misattribution, that on, maybe there's several, but I saw one in particular, there's hieroglyphics carved in them, right? But it looks like my daughter did it in kindergarten. I mean, the very poor stuff, and a lot of stuff in dynastic Egypt we know is perfect. Not from a precursor civilization, it's just that they were able to do things that were perfect, right? This isn't even perfect. And you're like, and then they say, okay, well, that's his cartouche, so that was from this time. And you're like, now, come on. No one is going to do the work to carve this perfect box in so many other ways and then just scribble some stuff on it to honor. Again, clearly that was somebody coming along later and saying, hey, let's give one for the boss. We're going to act like this was his. Or,
All right, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, and that happens again and again and again. And hell, we repurpose things all the time. I mean, when you remodel a home, it's like you come and just look at the last thing left and said, okay, well, that wallpaper was made this date, so that house was built then.
Right.
You're like, no, somebody put up some new damn wallpaper, man,
George, you were on the Danny Jones podcast, and I heard one of the funniest things. You were referring to this field of astrobiology. I have the understanding that you see the value in astrobiology, but you have a critique of the astrobiology community and how they conduct their science. I'm going to just state a quote here from you from your Danny Jones appearance. You say, "There's a certain resistance in the field of astrobiology. In my view, astrobiology is the most fucked up discipline on Earth. It is the most self-defeating, timid bunch of bullshitters that ever were. They'll never address this stuff. They'll only go so far. They're only looking for the building blocks." Did I get that quote right?
Indeed, you did, and I would just have to amend it and add they're willfully ignorant posers. Okay? It's the most ridiculously arrogant, self-centered, Aristotelian bullshit that could be imagined. You know, Aristotle said two things. He said, everything orbits around us, and all life started in a little pool of water, right? And it took 2,000 years to have Galileo and Copernicus come along and disabuse us of the notion that we were the center of the universe. But that second one has been very persistent. The idea that we are the origin of life and that it shall be found on our planet, you know, is just so arrogant. It makes no sense. And then people are willing to, you know, common culture and even most scientists willing to say that, yes, life exists elsewhere. And then they'll still say, but it started here. Mm-hmm. Or it started over there too. Mm-hmm. And the idea that no, it's absolutely everywhere, that it's woven into the fabric of the universe, that it's timeless, has no beginning, probably has no end, but life is a component of, you know, existence, still hasn't taken hold.
In general, it seems like this is quite an interesting field of study. We're talking about trying to find, searching for life outside of Earth in a variety of different ways. It could be searching for microbial life. It could be searching for intelligent life. Maybe we're looking at identifying possible radio signals from space, or maybe we're looking at trying to discover what compounds are in the atmosphere of an exoplanet a few million light years away. So talk just briefly about the promise, about the hope of astrobiology and the positive influence it could have on our understanding of who we are here on Earth.
Oh, I just think a whole new world could unfold before us. You know, if you finally made I think we have made the definitive discoveries, but what would be the next step? The accepted definitive discovery? You know, if we ever, you know, cross that barrier, there are endless questions. Then you'd have a real purpose out there. What kind of life is there? Where does it hide? Where does it thrive? How much is it like us? How much is it different than us? You know, it would give us a whole new way to approach the cosmos. But again, they're self-defeating, willfully ignorant wussies, right? That don't have the courage to even run down those things that have the most promise.
Recently, I interviewed an award-winning biochemist. He's in Florida. His name is Dr. Stephen Benner. Mm-hmm. Okay, and he's actually studied NASA's history of, you know, their search for microbial life elsewhere outside of Earth. But he's basically of the position that while our recent interest in these icy outer moons in our solar system that orbit Saturn and Jupiter, there's potential that we could find life there. Or even with the James Webb Telescope that's now looking into deep space and seeing and discovering Earth-like planets with atmospheres that could be habitable for life, that he's essentially saying that these are a big waste of time. Because if NASA was really serious about searching for life and using their mantra, follow the water, well, if you're really serious about finding life, Mars is the first and most obvious choice to go to. And as you know, back in the 70s, the Viking mission sent these orbiters and landers to do just that, to go find life. And there's an experiment known as the Labeled Release Experiment, designed by Dr. Gil Levin and Patricia Ann Stratt. They send these things down to Mars, and not only do they find evidence for active microbial metabolism, actually there's a few different life detection experiments, that's the primary one. There's other ones on there that also supported this notion that there's active microbial metabolism occurring on the surface of Mars. But that was in 1976, and while the results, however misinterpreted they were at the time, have now been showing that, yes, we did indeed find active microbial metabolism, but here we are 50 years later, and they haven't followed up on this.
No, that's the whole crime of it, is not that they interpreted the results wrong or some kind of weird bureaucratic self-defeatism, caused them to do it, but they didn't follow up on it. How could you just shut the door on the study for life? I was 10 years old when those results came back, and I was following it, and I was hopeful. And I remember being disappointed, man, and that pisses me off, right? Because the principal researcher, Gil Levin, said for the next 40 years, no, we found life. The criteria were met. They gave me a mission, a job to design life experiments, design them, and the results came back positive, and it was swept away, as so much of this information has. The number of people who know that that's controversial, or that, Levin, I remember he published a Scientific American column, about 5 years ago, right before he died? He was in his 90s. And he was still saying, hold on, folks, let me give you the details here. Here's what happened. It's a little bit complicated, but we found it. And we've blown all this stuff up there, and they can't put one component on to look for life. And as you know, Brian, I know that we share this frustration, is the search for the building blocks of life. It's endlessly repeated mantra, the building blocks. Why would you search for the building blocks and not life itself and how do you distinguish building blocks from life? If building blocks are organic chemicals, and you're just detecting the fact and only admit that it's organic chemical, but aren't willing to see if that collection of organic chemicals might make up a cell, that's not helpful. I could look at you right now, Brian, and say, well, there's a collection of organic chemicals. The things that are in front of me are all the building blocks of life. You've certainly got the building blocks of life in you, Brian, but you also happen to fucking be alive, right? And that's what they're constantly out there doing. Mars is breathing methane seasonally. And then I think what most astrobiologists do for a living is try to disprove life. They try to come up with alternate explanations that seem to indicate life on the idea that we don't want to, run out in front of ourselves and have any, but, that if we're misinterpreting, that it's better to endlessly try to find how there could be another mechanism going on than run it down as if it were true. And that's a shame. And it's cost us 50 years of understanding our true place in the universe.
Well, that's exactly my next point, is that in my conversation with Barry DiGregorio, who was Gil Levin's biographer, and award-winning biochemist Dr. Stephen Benner, they're highlighting that NASA in 1976 reached the wrong conclusion based on their misinterpretation of the data, and thus the narrative was started then, nearly 50 years ago, and sustained to this day, is that there is absolutely, quote, no evidence for life on Mars. And they haven't corrected themselves. And unfortunately, for nearly 50 years, the Mars community, the scientific community, and the public has been under this, false understanding. And what a wasted opportunity.
It's a tremendous wasted opportunity. And when I tell people who, the occasional person that's interested, when you say, oh no, we don't test for life. We tested for life once. And that's it. And actually, it seems like we tested positive. They can't believe that. Well, we got those rovers up there. Surely there's a little box on there that'll tell you whether something's alive. Nah.
And I speak to astrobiologists today, and they don't know the history. They don't
Oh,
know
do
any
they
of
not?
this stuff. And so
God.
when I try to talk to them and I explain these things, they think that I'm crazy or I'm making stuff up. And I'm like, no, you just got to go read a little bit more.
They don't understand the detailed history of the labeled release experiment?
No, they've never.
I know that's obscure stuff to the public, but if you were an astrobiologist, you should be well versed in every detail of the only test for life ever done on another planet. Are you serious? They don't.
It's not. It's worse than that. It's not that they don't understand the details. Some of them have never even heard of it.
Oh, what do you do?
So they don't even know why
there's
this conclusion of there's no evidence of life on Mars. They don't even know why that conclusion.
It's just built in for them.
It's just built in. But there is this promise that, we're going to find life eventually. And I think astrobiology as a field of study is quite a sexy field. However, they're not addressing the actual evidence that we have in front of us today. And I think that's not only irresponsible, I just think it's almost worse than that. They're either deliberately ignorant or just so entrenched in the institutional narrative, and it's just really unfortunate.
I think they don't want to be that person that makes the big claim that later gets burned. And you can even get burned if you're right. So they don't want to step out even if they know they're right, because other people have been burned. I think the sociological incentives, cultural incentives, and disincentives are so much more powerful than the search for the truth, that it'll take years and years of fighting our, baser instincts to stay with the herd to answer this question appropriately.
I would really like to speak more with astrobiologists, and maybe this is something you might consider for your conferences, is trying to invite that community into this, because especially if, getting Panspermia more attention.
Yeah.
Because to your point about, this is a good segue. This idea of Panspermia, this is an interesting word. It's a well-known word. I don't think most people who know the word don't necessarily know who is responsible for popularizing the word. So just getting back to Cosmic Summit for just a second, you have all these credentialed and non-credentialed scientists talking about ancient human history. You have Professor Robert Schoch, you have Randall Carlson, you've got Ben Van Kerkwyk, you've got Luke Caverns. These people are quite well known. They have quite a following. They're, this next generation of scientists, credentialed or not, that are bringing attention to this idea that there was this lost civilization here on Earth, or ancient technology, things of that nature. So you have so much focus on ancient human civilization, yet you invite, as your keynote speaker to this conference, a gentleman by the name of Chandra Wickramasinghe from Wales. Who is he? And why do you consider him to be your favorite scientist?
Because I think he's a modern day Copernicus. I think he's somebody that millennia from now will be remembered as a person that was well before their time. And I think that's fascinating. I think it sucks that there's so many examples of people who weren't vindicated in their own lifetime. And he may achieve vindication in his lifetime. If he doesn't, it's a terrible crime. And if I see a chance of that happening, then I want to publicize him as much as possible, even if it's not. It's a point of personal privilege. While I'm still setting the conference up myself, I'm going to stick some things in there that are kind of my kind of thing, because I think it's interesting. And, it gets a little bit to impact too. Impact science is a big part of Panspermia. And Chandra had actually, he's collaborated on catastrophic subjects and worked with Bill Napier before is a key thing. So I can find a tie into it. But I think that question's so important that we can talk about the vases and things like this that are groundbreaking new information. But if I can put a scientist in front of this audience that's as eloquent and credentialed and unrefuted as Chandra, then I couldn't imagine not doing it. And he's just a wonderful person. He's just a priceless human being. He's a beautiful speaker. He's without guile. He'll get a little upset sometimes, but he's not a bitter old man, and he damn well has reason to be. He's lived a hell of a life. He's a Sri Lankan, native Sri Lankan, is from a family of distinguished, highly intelligent mathematicians in Sri Lanka. And as a child, they had, back then he was born in the British Empire, all right? And they had a global scholarship program where the Queen would test all those brown people out there and see who's the smartest, right? So you'd have a Kenyan would come and Sri Lankan and whatnot from all over the empire, and they were able to come to Cambridge and Oxford free. You just had to be the smartest kid in the empire. And Chandra won that, and he got put by his parents on a steamship, in the 50s when he was 17, and shipped off to Cambridge and went into the hands of Sir Fred Hoyle, right? So he got the smartest young bloke they could find worldwide and handed him to the greatest British scientists of the 20th century. And they made just a dynamic duo, man. They're one of the fantastic collaborations in the history of science. And within a decade, they had taken cosmic dust, the dust clouds out there, and determined what we were just making fun of, that it was actually the building blocks of life, that is organic chemicals. It wasn't just little flecks of mica or something up there, or graphite, right? That it was actually kind of the same stuff we're made out of. And they moved so quickly into the truth that they left everyone behind, and that stuck, right? That's as far as they got. Was the mainstream will tell you right now, and they'll give them credit, sometimes, that the discovery of organic molecules is the principal component of interstellar clouds was quite amazing at the time, and everybody accepted it. Then they went on and said, it ain't just the building blocks, folks.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because on your website, you've got a blog post titled, Microbes Entombed in Cosmic Dust Collected from Outside Surface of Space Station Window. I'm going to quote, If you can ask people if they believe that microbial life forms are raining more or less constantly into the atmosphere from beyond, you will no doubt get blank stares from 100%. It is more widely believed that people's bodies are probed in their bedrooms by extraterrestrials than little ETs by the trillions might waft through your open window.
Yeah, I still believe that. It's amazing that people will believe that aliens will, and hell, maybe they do, crawl in your window and probe your anus, right? But you say that microbial life is out there and floating in ambient space, entombed in cosmic dust, and people just never heard such a crazy thing. No, that's space. You'd have to be in a flying saucer to live.
Yeah.
That there's not another level there, that there's just aliens.
Right.
But how could there possibly be diatoms and plankton floating around in space? Because space is a vacuum and everything dies if it's in space.
See, I've found the same thing. I'll talk to people in the UFO circles.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're now having that conversation as a culture about flying saucers for real.
Yeah.
And what the government may or may not know. It's like that scene from Independence Day where the president's like, oh no, Roswell is just a bunch of malarkey or whatever he said. And then the guy in the background, he's like, actually, sir, that's not entirely accurate. Like that's a little too true to life for me. So now I'm like, okay, wow, there must be something going on here. But anyway, I'll talk to these folks in the UFO community, and I'll bring up this concept of life on Mars, and they think, no, that's a bunch of BS. And it's like, okay, you're going to believe the flying saucer over microbes on a planet right next door.
Right.
Okay. It's just surprising. That's so surprising.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here is that up there in the International Space Station, We've got astronauts from both the United States and Russia, and from time to time, they'll go out onto the outside surface of their windows, and I like how you phrased it here. They'll do a swab of the biological scum that is accumulated on the outside of their windows. So, to tell me about their research into doing this.
Well, this is the damnedest thing I've ever encountered in all of my studies. The most frustrating one. I was waiting to pick my son up in elementary school car line one day. Saw a flash across that said, plankton found on space station. And immediately I said, hell yes, Chandra's been vindicated, man. Sweet, they found, that's right, plankton on the space station. Let me read a little bit of this. It says, TASS reported a press release from the Russian space agency that made reference that they'd found plankton and diatomaceous materials and viral materials and bacteria on the space station, which just seems absolutely incredible. But I was like, okay, it's off to the races. We're there now. And I mean, nothing went crickets. You got just the clickbait things. Then space.com comes out and calls bullshit. And then they, blah, 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 and the Russians won't answer back. And maybe it was just some random press release. Crickets. And then I had missed it for a long time. It turned out that was about 2015. And what they had done, subsequently found out because not a lot of information at first. I found out they had actually published a paper 3 or 4 years later, and I had missed it. And it was in 2018, and they published a paper that gave us the details. And what they had done on 10 different occasions in spacewalks, swiped the outside of the space station at various locations, particularly the big window, like the tourist window that they hang out and look at the Earth through, right? Just swipe the outside. And it was over 5 years, 10 different times, 10 out of 10. Every one of them found scum. Bacteria, plankton, E. coli, blah, 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 blah. And that's a hell of a paper. It got no press. I had missed it. And what it did is it gave on the one hand on the other, said either it came from above or it came from below and came from Earth. Both of which are absolutely astounding discoveries. There's no other way to do it. They ruled out, these are their own scientists, but they ruled out contamination. I haven't heard anybody say it was contaminated, right? And they used procedures that would suggest that, you're not going to get contaminated 10 out of 10 when you're testing that stuff. Okay, so then you're left with it came from above or below. And they kind of punted and said there must be a yet to be explained electrical phenomena that captures bacteria in Madagascar soils and diatoms in the Barents Sea, because both of these forms of life were able to be placed, in their species where they would be on Earth, that lofts them up 400 kilometers to orbit in the space station. So that's what they landed on that paper. And they kind of gave it an either or, and we lean on this. But what the hell does that tell us? That tells us that life is just spewing out of the Earth all the time. That's cool. That proves panspermia, right? And the other alternative, the one they shied away from, was that it's incoming and that ambient space is filled with life. Now, here's an important point, because people will rightly say, well, how does a bacterium, survive in the harsh conditions of space and whatnot? It's a good question. But it isn't those little bits on their own. They're entombed in cosmic dust, right? And I think it's 100 tons a day of cosmic dust, which is really comet dust. It's disintegrating comets. And you have a zodiacal cloud out in the solar system. There's a tremendous amount of dust out there, and we're sweeping through it all the time. And these are little bits. Now, some of them are pretty big, even be visible, right? So if you take a bacterium or small, diatom or whatnot, and stick it inside one of these pieces of cosmic dust, it's orders of magnitude larger, right? It makes a great little spaceship. And the stuff is desiccated, hibernated, and in switch-off mode. It's in just add water and heat, and it'll come back.
Like sea monkeys.
And we've proved that. yeah, like sea monkeys. Exactly. And we proved that because we've taken every form of little life in space, painted it on panels, exposed it to space, and most of it survives just fine, which would suggest why would evolution endow these little creatures with the ability to withstand space unless they were made or evolved in a fashion that could inhabit space. Okay? So they got the either or paper. And then to make it even better, I was like, oh yeah, because I didn't discover either of these, and I had missed this. Then a couple of years later, or I don't know how long it was, Chandra had done another paper with the lead author of the Russian paper. And you got to take these people seriously. It's fun. Sometimes, you'll see a bunch of names on a scientific paper in some institutions, and then you'll say, well, I don't really know how serious to take these people, but you got to take these Russians serious because you know that they had their hands on materials from the space station. You got to be a pretty good scientist. You got to be up there in the ranks to even touch such things, and they had access to them, so they're serious. Well, the lead author of it, Dr. T.V. Grebenikova, a woman, is the woman that found life in space. And one of my goals is to have her get adequate credit for it. You could say Chandra and Fred found it by, finding the spectra of the clouds out there. But I don't know, really having our hands on it, came out, had it in a lab, came from space, it's life. That's Miss T.V. Grebenikova. So had the equivocal paper. She then joined Chandra in another collection of Panspermia, I think one other Russian from the first paper, and wrote another paper and said, bullshit, it came from above. And she was the lead author of the first one that equivocated. How cool is that? That she had the courage to...
She went one step further.
To go and join the radical panspermists.
Yeah.
And say this came from above. So I think Grebenikova discovered life on space, and I hope we can... It's gone kind of dark according to Chandra now since the Ukraine war. It's very unfortunate. Just shows how things can get shut down that have nothing to do with. And I'd love for her to be interviewed by you. I'd love her to come to the Cosmic Summit.
That'd be great.
And I think the Russians should get credit for discovering life in space. And what a wonderful thing to have a female scientist in Russia to make that discovery. And they should take some ownership of it. And I don't know what kind of political dynamics make people like that stay quiet, but if there's any way to broach that, we'd love to fly her to Greensboro next year and have her tell her story, because she found life in space.
In my conversations with Professor Richard Hoover, he has told me about his extensive collaboration with the Russians and their work with microbiology and microfossils. So it makes sense that the Russians have some street cred, so to speak, on this particular subject. I've got this paper here, published in 2018, the second paper you're talking about, published with Chandra, titled Confirmation of Microbial Ingress from Space. And she's credited working with the Federal Research Center of Epidemiology and Microbiology in Moscow. I'm sure you just don't wake up one day and just, automatically get a job like that.
That's right.
Have to know what you're doing.
And then you got to be good in that position to be somebody that gets to test the space station stuff.
Yeah, which is highly, that's...
But I don't know why the Russians wouldn't play it up. See, that's when I get kind of conspiracist minded.
Right.
That maybe that slipped out. It was like that press release was like something that wasn't supposed to come out because it went away so quick.
Yeah.
And then maybe they figured they had to write a paper. But we gotta come down on the side of Earth origin. But for some reason, the governments just go, we don't want to be the one that discovers life. Is there some other grand, I hate to say it, conspiracy going on, where major governments, big governments that have access to space actually know some of this and just don't want us to know it. I don't know. Let's put that one away and just say it was, again, just weird sociology and negative incentives.
So to recap the points you just made, I've highlighted a few sections of this paper where they swab the scum off these windows and they look at the microbiology in there, and what they observed, quoting from the paper,
oh good,
the similarity of the discovered genotypes with terrestrial bacteria could suggest a possible terrestrial origin. But the elevation of the terrestrial bacteria and dust to the height of the International Space Station at 400 kilometers presents serious problems. So how did it get there? If something blew it up there, how did it blow it up there so high? Because the proposed dust vortices may appear, there are dust vortices that appear at an altitude of about 110 to 120 kilometers, and it becomes possible to transport particles to altitudes of 130 kilometers and perhaps higher. It's what it says in the paper. But skipping ahead a little bit, if it is the case that there is a viable mechanism that can uplift biological dust up to 400 kilometers, some fraction of this material will also escape Earth's gravity. And to your point, if it's not raining down from above, then it must be strong enough that we're pushing it out in space. In this case, we won't have an interesting demonstration of reverse panspermia. So
that's right.
One of these two things is true here.
That's right.
Or
So
maybe
you've
even
got
both.
to run it down. How can an astrobiologist not dedicate their career to getting to the bottom of that? And in fact, just memory hole it. Probably most of them aren't even aware of it.
We're just going to let this one go.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's a profound shame. And those people should be ashamed. And I tell you, it's just, God knows, one thing has changed in the last 10 years. There is a human agent that could, on his own initiative and personal decision making, get to the bottom of this. Right? And that hadn't been true because no single individual had access to space until Elon Musk came along. And he controls a space agency that is actually more competent than our space agency or our largest military industrial contractor, right? And he's making calling every one of the shots. And if Elon, I'll buy the box of tampons, man. Okay, because that's what they use to swipe it. I'm not sure if I said that earlier. It probably sounded weird, but that's what they use to swipe the space station with simple tampons. But Elon, I'll buy the box of tampons. You supply the rocket, and let's get to the bottom of this thing. It's not that hard. We've got. Should Bezos do it? It's floating around out there inside Cosmic Tusk. They put a collection plate at the top of the Pyrenees Mountains, up like some 20,000 feet. High winds up there. It's generally a very, thought to be a relatively sterile place, right? And they got 100 million viral particles on a square meter up there. And what Milton Wainwright, who works with Chandra, that's his specialty, is trying to see, putting things up in the high atmosphere and seeing if there's life up there. Now, you run in that same problem. Did it come from above or below? But if we're right, that these viruses that you find 20,000 feet up by the millions come from above, it explains everything. It explains the jumps in evolution that have always been inexplicable. How does a squid become an octopus out of nowhere? There's a constant mixing of the soup, and what we are is a goulash of happenstance input from whatever the galaxy gave us, right? And that there are worlds out there, and I kind of checked this with Chandra. I was like, hold on, man. If we're taking in DNA, and that's why we have this incredible diversity. That's why you can, have a panda and a lizard and a whale and just all this weird stuff that just seems like, how the hell did it all diverge? And science has a problem with this. They'll admit that it's tough to get there in 4 billion years, right? And they explain it all the way with time. Time is such a great whitewash. Well, you give it enough time, right? And how the hell did microbes pop up immediately after the Hadean period when Earth was literally a living hell? And then boom, as soon as it cools down, as soon as you had damn water, you had damn archaeobacteria and algae and stuff like that right away, because it's coming from above. Okay, so I said, Chandra, does that mean that there are probably worlds out there that are kind of insect heavy? Then there are other worlds that are kind of whaley? And there are other worlds that are kind of bird town? And they might have other stuff too. And he said, that would be my belief. You know, so it changes your way of looking at everything.
Yeah.
You start saying, hey, all this beautiful stuff, we aren't responsible for it. We're a collection plate for the universe's viral contributions. And what a cool diversity that suggests exists out there. And it helps explain why we have such a wonderful palette of life. Instead of just saying the most arrogant thing you could possibly say, which, well, it all started here. Then it just branched into this.
And to be clear, we're only discussing the distribution of life, not necessarily its origin. Because
that's right.
Who knows how life came to be?
Yeah.
You just mentioned how much time it would have taken, you know, DNA to develop all these variety of species. And Richard Hoover showed me a little diagram one time, a little chart or something that said, in order to get DNA this complex at this time, it would have to be, it would have had to have started over twice as long as the age of the Earth ago. So it could have been out there, and maybe Earth wasn't habitable enough, but once it clicked on, then all the stuff that was just raining down already then had a habitable world to make something of it. This makes sense, and it doesn't really challenge, you know, anyone's belief about how life started, but it's undeniable. To Professor Wickramasinghe's point, the evidence is undeniable at this point. Life is being shot out all over the place. It's raining down from us. It's just a matter of time before the community sort of catches up with this evidence. And not only do we have these live samples of, you know, the scum off the International Space Station, but you know, he's done work with meteorites, so has Professor Hoover, and they've literally photographed fossilized microbes. And a lot of attention gets, well, the public, the most well-known microfossil in a meteorite, we were talking about this earlier, known as the Allen Hills meteorite, which made it all the way up to President Clinton. Okay, 1996. I mean, this was a big deal, and to this day, I'll still see it in my news feed. You know, scientists arguing back and forth whether or not it was life, and I'm thinking, you know, it's great that we're having this discussion. But after meeting Professor Hoover, did I discover? Well, it turns out that this is not only this is not just the only example of microfossils in a meteorite, and in my opinion, I don't even think it's the best example. I'd look at the work of Professor Hoover and Professor Wickramasinghe, because both of them have discovered these things called diatoms in these meteorites. And I think it's just so obvious that when I'm looking at it to my untrained eye, when I see their photographs, I'm thinking, that's not part of the rock. How come no one's talking about this? Have you seen some of these?
Yeah, I have, man. And you know, you got to not believe your own lying eyes. They've already shown such good pictures, and they will just say, must be some process that yet discovered that makes things look like that are dead. I mean, what do you do with that? If you're always going to just punt and say, we just hadn't figured out how geology manages to manifest itself in a lifelike form like that.
You've seen diatoms, right?
Yeah.
The diatoms, tell me what you think, because
they look like a little spaceship.
Bacteria, you got to know what you're looking at. To identify it, you know, from maybe the background matrix that it's sort of connected to. But a diatom specifically, and the diatoms were new to me, but apparently they're very common and very well known and understood.
They're the most common thing in the ocean.
But the way they look, their structure leaves no doubt to an untrained eye that it is biological in origin, just simply by the way it looks. You know, Richard Hoover was making the point, you may have not ever seen an okapi, which is this weird horse, giraffe, zebra-like animal, but if you were to see it for the first time, you know that it's life. You know, you can know just to an untrained eye. And diatoms specifically, Professor Richard Hoover and Chandra, they both observed diatoms in the Polonnaruwa meteorite that fell just over a decade ago, but they're still studying this meteorite, okay? And Richard Hoover has found new diatoms in this meteorite, and he's looking at it on one of the latest scanning electron microscopes, okay, a very high quality one, and you can see it clear as day. It's like, you don't need any degree to know that what you're looking at here is biological, or at least once was living. And so we have the International Space Station data, like saying this stuff's happening right now, and we also have this fossilized evidence. And I'm thinking, why isn't anybody making a bigger deal about this? It's just so surprising.
I just thinking back to, I don't know if I quite got it with you, but when I was talking about the astrobiologist that was on Sam Harris, what she said was, if you go run this down, we still don't know how life originated. So panspermia doesn't really answer anything. Now, that's a deliberate dodge.
It is.
You don't have to know, first of all, Chandra would say it's inherent, you know, that it's everywhere and always has been. So to quit looking for a beginning, it's like looking for a Big Bang, you know. And of course, Fred didn't believe in the Big Bang, and he's being vindicated by the James Webb Telescope, right?
Because we can't answer this question, why bother trying to answer that question?
Right. Like, we don't really need to know if life's everywhere, because then we still wouldn't know where it first came from. So the study of the origin of life should ignore the fact that it's panspermia is probably in action. It's very unfortunate.
You brought up peer review. Peer review seems to be getting a second look here, because quite often you publish a paper, and without the skeptics or the critics out there who disagree with the conclusions of the paper, if that paper was not peer reviewed, they'll just start with that. Well, it wasn't peer reviewed, meaning to say we can't take that seriously. No, therefore no one else should take it seriously. But you know, peer review wasn't always a part of academic publishing.
Right.
It sort of took over in maybe the latter half of the 20th century. I don't know all the particulars, but it seems to be that some people are making the case that perhaps peer review isn't productive.
I think it's broken. I've seen it up close, and it doesn't do you any good when you get in the journals. Remember our early thing, it used to be that, you know, that's the bar they set for you if you got a crazy idea. Well, you get that in a peer-reviewed paper, I'll take it seriously. And I kind of went in the younger Dryas thing with that idea. Well, here we go. We're going to, first paper, Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, top 3 journal, right? And we had National Academy members on our team publishing the paper. And we put it in PNAS. It wasn't good enough. You know, put it in a dozen different journals, high-profile journals. And we actually got published, and you used to think that's good enough to break things open, but it's not. Same thing happened to Chandra and Fred. 70 papers in Nature, and it still didn't do any good, right? So it's like they put this goalpost out there of peer review. Well, goddamn, make it a hard goalpost, and if I win, give me a touchdown, you know? But they don't do that. You can even get through, you know, that filter and still encounter willful ignorance, you know, and pushback. So, yeah, it's terribly broken, and I've seen the reviewers they'll assign sometimes were assigned to be hostile to it. And we would submit these papers again and again and again and go through revision after revision after revision. And they're just playing keep away from you. And the Comet Research Group made a big move, I guess it was earlier this year, and just created their own journal. And I think that's fine. We shouldn't have done it right off the bat, but after you got 50, 60, 70 papers out there in major journals and done the peer review thing, and each one of them you have to pound and pound and pound to claw your way into the journal. And it takes a lot of time. At some point you go, hey, let me just put the paper out there, write the paper I want. We have our own journal, right? And what is it, Airburst, Cratering, and Impacts or something like that. And so I think they did the right thing. Kind of had to just prove your chops. Yeah, we went and played the game. We won, then they didn't give us a prize. But I'm not going to play the game anymore. We just want to get our information out there.
Yeah.
So all of our papers now are going, straight to the web after they are peer reviewed by our own journal staff. We've got some people that are going to read every bit of it, and we've rejected some. Just saw one rejected on Carolina Bays. So I think there are ways around it. I think there's no stopping things like YouTube. I think are hugely beneficial. There just wasn't a way to get an idea out there before. It was either a published paper or a published book. And now everybody can. And it's messy. It's messy as hell. But it coughs up people that have valuable and invaluable contributions to science that are unfiltered. I don't know what old YouTube's going to look like. I think it's a much bigger deal than people give it credit for. And it's funny, things like that are always kind of dismissed at first. YouTube, ha ha ha, it's just a silly, shallow thing. No, it isn't, man. It's the first mass communication tool that's accessible to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And if your idea is good enough, it'll be heard. And we're seeing that right now with yeah.
So let's talk about something else I saw on YouTube. This is our bonus round here, okay? So, goodness, just when you think you know everything, you find something else out there and you're like, hang on a second. Now, what the hell is this all about? I got to learn something else. There's some other part to this world that I didn't know what was going on. Okay, so I first heard this on Matt Bell's podcast. Okay, he's got a fantastic podcast.
He sure does.
Started getting into, so keep up the great work, Matt Bell. But he had this gentleman on here who I believe was at the Cosmic Summit, a man by the name of Timothy Hogan.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and as I understand it, he is the president or the
He's
director,
the Grand Templar.
the Grand Templar of the Knights Templar.
Yeah.
I had to.
He's the top
here.
of the heap of the whole Templar Freemason thing.
Okay, now I heard of Knights Templar, I think in Indiana Jones,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
And that was it. I didn't even know if it was real or not, but apparently it is. Okay, sorry, I'm catching up here. But here's what he's claiming.
Yeah.
Okay, and at this point, I think you even said this the other day, or rather on a recent podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard so much these days about this, that, and the other, and it's sort of like, I don't really know what to believe anymore, but I'm not so easy to dismiss some of these new ideas, just given what I've heard. It just seems like there's so many things developing and evidence to back it up. Who's to say that you're wrong or you're wrong or you're wrong? Anyway, so I've got a much more open mind these days about, what to take seriously and what to dismiss. But, okay, I say that because this hit me pretty hard. Apparently, he has in his possession Arks.
Yeah.
Like the Ark of the Covenant. We are talking about Indiana Jones here. The Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah. Jesus bones and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, bones of Jesus. I mean, this is straight out of Indiana Jones.
John.
Now, I'm a movie guy, so quite often that's how my frame of reference. But for people out there who've never heard of this and who would just dismiss it. Like, what you had him at the conference?
I wanted them to bring one. I didn't ask them straight up, but I mean, gosh, what a better place to roll out one of these Arks. I mean, there's supposed to be a dozen of them. They got them secreted around the world, and that they've been held by these sects for thousands of years, and now they're going to roll them out.
What is
That's
it?
a big claim, man.
What is it? What is it?
I don't really know much more than you do.
Some sort of energy device? Some sort of ancient energy?
Well, no, I do believe the Ark of the Covenant itself was a plasma generator, right? But I don't think they're always speaking of the Ark as that kind of Ark. I think they're also talking about it as maybe an ossuary because they have bones in them. Why would you have bones if you're also manipulating some kind of physical,
The bones are in the Ark?
Yeah. I mean, some of these things that they're calling Arks, it's a little unclear to me, and you'd think having them both at the summit, and they were, just hinting about this stuff.
And then something about Thomas Jefferson sending Lewis and Clark out to go check on the location, because this sounds like, what's that Nicolas Cage movie?
Yeah.
Where he goes and steals the Declaration of Independence, national treasure.
Yeah. No, it's exactly that kind of stuff. And I don't know what to think of it either, except, I trust Scott and Tim. I've spent a lot of time talking with those guys, and they hadn't given me any more details than what they, have said at the summit and whatnot. But I don't know what game they could be up to. I mean, these are obviously ancient artifacts of some great import that have been hidden for a long time. I do not think they're going to pop up with a half dozen forgeries or something. I mean, they were doing fine in their regular career without wrapping it up with a big forgery.
Why now? Why disclose this now?
I think because everything's so fucked up. And maybe it causes us to, reassess our true history. And maybe there's something revelatory in the Arks themselves. I don't know what's in it. But I didn't know much about the Templars. Read the Dan Brown book, watched the movie 15 years ago and stuff like that. But I didn't appreciate, as then when I met Scott and invited him to come, first of all, that it's related to our subjects. And some people say, what the hell Knights Templar have to do with, unconventional history, particularly ancient history?
Right.
Well, because the knowledge they were preserving, the Templars, came from Atlantis. And it is the system by which humans control their baser instincts as groups. And respect for other people, fundamental respect for differences, and liberal with a little L, right? That all of those notions that are embedded in the Constitution, that attempted experiment, all came from that knowledge. And all of those guys were Freemasons, right? I mean, all the founding fathers were part of that secret sect. And that sect, if you take it back to the Templars, was preserving knowledge that reached all the way back. And that's how to best manage ourselves. And that's why Francis Bacon, talked about the new Atlantis and whatnot, that was America, was the test bed for these ideas. And it worked out pretty damn well. Everybody that I think thinks about America properly says, wow, miraculous. What a great idea for these guys so far long ago to go just race ahead of the rest of the world and come up with such a finely tuned machine to keep us level and not at each other's throats, even though, it's getting a little stressed these days after 250 years. But I thought that it started to make sense to me. That, hey, there is these Templars, there's some deeper knowledge here. And both my grandfathers were Freemasons. And as I've come to understand these rituals and whatnot, they date back to Egypt at a minimum, if you look at it that way and take it all seriously. And then they'll tell you actually that's coming from before. So call it Atlantis. So I think about my grandfathers, down in Columbia and Charlotte, North Carolina, over at the lodge, practicing rituals that were handed down from Atlantis. And these are the most staid men that, are in oil paintings with suits on and three-piece vests. And they were out doing stuff that's about as woo as it gets. When you're practicing rituals that have that kind of background,
right.
And that made it all the way to the 20th century. And now that all falling apart. The Freemasons are like somewhat of a, dying tradition. Most of those lodges are barely used, or many of them are. I know it's still popular in places. I'm probably going to get some grief from Freemasons, but it's not as popular as it once was, which is, I don't think, a good thing. Because I think that they had a good template for how we're supposed to be respectful for each other and civil society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I did notice a lot of crossover between, this study of ancient human civilization and, Timothy Hogan's presentation on Matt Bell's podcast. I'm like, whoa, so apparently they have all this knowledge about ancient Egypt too?
Yeah.
And they've got access that nobody else does? Like, what the hell is going on?
And they said they're rolling it all out. That's why I hope for some big revelation of the cosmos. And there were some, I recommend to people to watch Tim and Scott's thing, and Haley Ramsey's.
I haven't watched his. Did he show any pictures or anything?
He didn't get as far back. I asked him, and I don't give much editorial control, but since it seems like an outlier, I said, Scott, make sure you get to Atlantis. Mm-hmm. And he didn't. But Tim recognized that. He came to me later, he said, I can't believe you didn't get to Atlantis. I did. You know, he took it all the way back, and people don't understand that its origins. You know, I think a lot of people say, well, maybe it's Proto-Egyptian or whatnot, but it's before that. They say they're preserving the original knowledge of the precursor civilization and handing it down, and that knowledge is what is able to knit us together in some kind of a little p progressive, you know, social organization.
Well, good for him for doing this now. I mean, they could have done this before, but he's choosing now. I guess it's a lucky time to be alive, to be witness to this.
And I love that Tim Hogan too. You know, he's not like some charismatic guy.
No, he's just
he ain't no cult leader. He just a regular dude.
Yeah.
But his family is blue blood Masonry. Like, he comes from the royal lineage of that stuff, right? And he came about it honestly. And he would be the guy to have that knowledge, you know, or the full story.
He hasn't invited you out to one of these locations so you can get a glimpse, so you could say, yep, I saw it with my own 2 eyes.
Stay tuned.
Oh, stay tuned. Okay, excellent. All right. He mentioned recently in one of these podcasts I was listening to, your interest in developing perhaps an add-on to the Cosmic Summit, having to deal more with UFOs. Is that still something?
Most of my friends in social circle and stuff, I think they're kind of getting it now, but you putting on a UFO conference? Are you having your UFO thing coming up? And it really had nothing to do with UFOs, but people think kooky conference, UFO conference, right? And I figured, well, what the hell? You got to have some UFOs in here. So I mixed a couple of UFO presentations in because I'm interested in this stuff. And what we're doing in the world of unconventional studies, in the pie chart, ancient civilizations, tech, and that kind of stuff, and Atlanta, and blah, blah, is a sliver when you include UFOs. I mean, UFOs, there are tens of millions of people intensely interested. There is not an East Coast conference. I mean, it's another case of everybody loves the songs and there ain't no concert. So we might add a day and see whether we can get 7 to 10 good, solid, I don't want to do it unless they're blue chip speakers, which will be a big, you know, will be tough. So now, between now and the beginning of the year, we'll make a decision and see whether we can get a critical mass of good speakers.
Yeah, there'd be a ton of people interested in going to that.
Yeah, you think so?
Oh, God.
Well, Greensboro's so convenient. It's the most logistically convenient place on the East Coast. It's got 4 interstates running through it.
There's just so much interest in UFOs.
That's right.
You go onto Twitter these days, it's like half the conversations are just about UFOs. And,
that's right.
Well, it would also fall under the umbrella of cosmic, you know, so.
Good point, yeah.
It's just something that came to me. Anyway, yeah, I could tell you that I think that could be just as big, because that's just, there's so much attention on that today, and both of these fields, that's why I started off this thing, these 2 hot topics.
Yeah.
I think they're equally just neck and neck, like which one is, because you have the UFO stuff that's being taken seriously by, you know, Congress, you know, having hearings
very
about
seriously.
this stuff, trying to pass legislation about this closure.
I mean, my God, and Chuck Schumer, the majority leader of the damn Senate, can't get his bill passed that wants to reveal everything.
What's there?
Like, something is going on.
Because we're not just talking about flying saucers.
That's right.
We're talking about what the new acronym is, NHIs. Non-human intelligence. Were they here the whole time? Where do they come from? What the hell's going on? Do they have anything to do with the history of our species guiding us? You know, we start to see these weird petroglyphs of things that look like aliens, like what the hell's going on here? You know?
Well, you know, there's significant interest now in whether there's a breakaway civilization, and then that ties it all the way back to the Younger Dryas event. That's what Randall believes, for instance. He says the sealing of the Temple of Dendera, when they're all going to the moon, it's all focused on the moon, is a recounting of the bug out. That I guess the catastrophe was greater than these people could handle, but he says they bugged out for the moon. And
are these things connected?
And moon's a strange thing, man.
Oh, yes, I've heard some things.
You know?
Okay, George, I really need help.
Okay, how can I help?
Trying to find someone
to
take a look at some photographs of what appear to be, just going to say it, pyramids
Okay.
on Mars.
Oh, that's all we need. Okay.
Okay? Let's put aside the face for a moment.
Yeah.
I'm talking about stuff that even back in the 70s, you'll have someone like Carl Sagan saying, well, from these orbiter images, we think these just simply look like pyramids. We need to take
I didn't know he said that.
in Cosmos. Yeah. And if we've got Carl Sagan saying we should take a closer look at these things that look like pyramids, and then we take photographs decades later of these things with high resolution images, NASA has taken compelling photographs, not of a triangular mountain, not of a mountain range, not a volcano, something that has symmetry, something that has angles, and repeated expressions of geometry and symmetry. I need someone to take a look at these. Who can I talk to?
Well, I will certainly take a look. I don't know if I'm going to sway the public based on my opinion, but this seems like kind of an everyman job.
I need someone,
You know,
maybe it's even a geomorphologist, a geologist. I need someone to tell me they can make that with geology, because I'm telling you.
I got to see him, Brian. I got to see him. I mean, I've seen some of this stuff, but I want to see what you think is the best examples of that.
I've got stuff, and it's not, I didn't sift through it. Look, I'm in contact with guys who just do nothing but sift through NASA images.
Yeah.
Okay? They're going to NASA or European Space Agency, and they're looking at
God
orbiter
bless 'em.
photographs, and I'm looking, holy moly, look at this thing. I wouldn't go to bat for these guys if I didn't believe that they found something real special. And the fact that NASA's not making a bigger deal about this, well, I guess it makes sense if they don't have any archaeologists on staff.
That's right.
Okay?
Oh, there's no way something like pyramids. I mean, you could have a sign beside it that said this is a Martian pyramid, and they would find a way to not bring it up.
This to me is unsettling.
Yeah.
If these are in fact pyramids, and they're a lot bigger than Egypt because the gravity's lower. Okay, you can have larger structures, build larger structures, but I need to find someone to take a serious look at these things, because this question is so unsettling to me that if we're going to talk about microbial life, well, what are the chances that intelligent life may have formed on Mars, because it was habitable, much more distant past than Earth was, and if we had 1 billion years.
I tell you, well, it's a long putt. I mean, I'm sitting here right now. I'm like, pyramids on Mars. I gotta see this stuff.
I know, and I felt the same way.
Yeah.
I'm like, no way, no how, not gonna buy it. And then I started looking at this stuff.
Yeah. A lot of things are going that way. We were talking earlier. I didn't think Roswell. I thought that was a bunch of bullshit. They flying saucer, crashed in New Mexico. But I'm believing I wouldn't say I'm believing anything now, but it's hard to believe. I was a pretty open-minded person,
right?
And just I'm getting a lot more open-minded. So lay some more on me, man.
Lastly,
okay.
Cosmic Tusk. You have a woolly mammoth tusk in your possession. It's hanging in your family room. This was apparently something that was 32 to 36,000 years old.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
It's got odd marks, iron blotches, and magnetic areas on it, seemingly indicating that it went through something traumatic.
Mine came when we were filming a National Geographic Explorer on the younger Dryas event. It's like 2011, or no, it's 2007. This is the very first documentary that came out. And I remember being excited because they were filming it in HD, right? And I wasn't a part of the filming, but Alan West went up there, one of the leading lights of the summit, and he goes to Canada Fossils and goes to the big Tusk warehouse. And they were going to film a recreation of him finding the other mammoth tusk that had these indications on it. So the night before they film, Alan says, well, while I'm up in the Tusk warehouse, I might as well look for some more. So he went around with his magnet, as he does, and found one that had these blotches on it. And it's presumably from Boneyard, Alaska, that it probably came from Reeves' thing. I've got an outstanding email to him asking him now. And so then they used that the next morning when they were filming as the recreation tusk. So it's 11 feet long, 22 inches around the root, weighs about 170 pounds. So I mean, it's a monster. And so the Canada Fossils was so pleased with the publicity that they had brought them by doing the show, they said, hey, research group, would you like this tusk? We've got a rock bottom price for you, just an incredible price. And research group, sent an email out to everybody. And these are all, scientists, and whatnot, and they didn't bite. I, on the other hand, had just renovated my house. And we had a big blank spot above the TV. And decorator was over at the house, and she goes, we got to fill that spot. And with you, George, we need something natural, something large, something old. And I was like, I think I got the thing. This was hot, and we were just been offered this tusk. I said, I think I can get this mammoth tusk. And man, it fit so perfectly above my TV. And then I love the contrast between something 38,000 years old and then a plasma television, just hanging out together. So I love having that memento of this whole wonderful experience, and just feel very fortunate. Want to get to know more about it. Wanted to know whether it came from Boneyard, Alaska, but that is the Cosmic Tusk. It has been in nature. That actually made it into nature early on before we started getting trashed. So it's called it bullets, iron bullets inside mammoth tusk or whatnot. And like I say, it's a great memento, and it is the Cosmic Tusk.
Anything else to add?
I appreciate your work here, and we need more Brian Dobbs out there. All right?
Thank you.
Just people who get curious and then try to communicate what they find out. And I think we both got a little bit of that in us. And so I love you, brother. And just stay at it.
Thank you.
And I think I'm just young enough, and you're plenty young enough we're going to get a day of vindication. Let's just hope that the friends that we've made around the world, particularly some of the elderly ones, live to see that day too.
Well said.
Thank you, sir.
George Howard, Cosmic Tusk.
Right on, brother.
This is the continuing series of Blue Planet Red, an award-winning documentary film on the history, evidence for life, and catastrophes that contributed to the death of Mars. The documentary includes interviews with NASA's lead astrobiologist, university professors, aerospace industry scientists, and independent researchers. If Mars was like Earth in the distant past, could there still be life there now? What happened to it? And what turned a blue planet red?